name is Mel, and welcome back to another episode of Romance Unleashed. Today, I have Lorena here with us, who is the founder of the P Files newsletter. Hi, Lorena.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited.
We are excited to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about you first, and then we'll go into the P Files?
Yes, of course. So, my name is Lorena Banda. I'm first generation, a daughter of immigrants, Chicana. I'm originally from South Texas, San Antonio. Um, but I've been traveling all around the US. I've lived in New York City, I lived in DC, and now I'm here in Miami.
What brought
Yeah,
you to Miami?
I got a job offer.
Okay.
Yes, I was laid off from my job in October of last year. So I work in politics. I do a bunch of like electoral work. I also train women on how to run for office.
Oh,
Yes. So my job ended up getting cut along with a lot of other of my coworkers, and I got a job offer here, so I moved.
lovely. Are you doing the same thing here as you were in Texas?
Um, Kind of, yes. So right now I'm working with a bunch of campaigns around Miami. So right now I'm a campaign strategist,
Okay.
and just leading a lot of campaigns around.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay, you've moved a little bit around the country. What else? Where's your background come from in politics?
So I received my bachelor's degree in social work from Texas State University.
Okay.
Go Cats. Um, so yeah, I got my degree there, and then I always knew I wanted to work in politics because of how I grew up. Both of my parents are both Mexican immigrants. And growing up in South Texas, I was able to witness a lot of racism. My parents were treated differently because of like their accents and how they
Mm,
look. And there's a lot of times where I had to stick up for my parents,
yeah.
and so did my sisters.
Right.
So I knew that I wanted to see change within my community,
Mhm.
and that starts with policy.
Mm,
So I got into working in electoral campaigns as a volunteer first, and then
okay.
I got promoted to a field organizer, I believe a month after. And that has allowed me, honestly, to really just move around the US and do the same work in different states.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
What have you seen? I guess it's different between like the state of politics when it comes to just Latin culture in different states.
That's a great question. It just is just different cultures, like Latino cultures, like, Mexicans down south is
Right.
it's different from Puerto Ricans and Dominicans in New York City and here too as well, a lot of Cubans.
Sure.
Um, but there's always that one common thing. There's a lot of like misconceptions and a lot of not enough voter education around there. A lot of our parents get information when it comes to like WhatsApp. And
Right.
it's like, oh, I saw this on WhatsApp. And it's like, no, mom, like that's fake. Don't listen to that. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that I've seen.
Yeah, I feel like my mom forwards me at least like one like WhatsApp message thread that they've sent her, and I'm like, "Woman, where are you getting this
Yes,
from?"
exactly.
But I think that is so important, especially in our communities, which a lot of our parents
Mhm.
and even some of us are immigrants, right? And so voter education is something that doesn't come readily
Mhm.
to us or to our communities, and it's like kind of word of mouth for you to
Yeah,
learn.
exactly.
I think like I've always helped my mom like enroll in like mail-in voting,
Yeah.
but like my stepdad won't vote at all, and so like there's so much that you have to teach in that. How has that been a challenge or a positive for you within your own family?
The positive, I appreciate that my mom comes to me and asks for my opinion.
Hmm.
Like who should I vote for? Like what's
Hmm.
going on around San Antonio? Like what should I be looking out for? The negative is just, again, I think it's the not enough voter education and
Right.
not really understanding like the background. And it's like, oh, well, nothing's changing. Like, why should I vote? But it's like, it takes years, even centuries. So
Right.
it's like, change is not going to happen overnight, but we need to continue to fight for these laws and for our community.
Right. I agree. Okay, so now tell us about P files.
Yes. So the P files, I started that because growing up, sex was not talked about,
Mm,
especially within the Latino community. It's such a taboo subject. There's so many stigmas. And I really wish there was somebody there for me to talk about sex, pleasure, health, um, and my period. We didn't really have that luxury to sit down with my parents to have those conversations because they were working long hours just to put food on the table. And also, it's a generational thing. I'm pretty
Right.
sure my mom's mom didn't talk to her about that, and so on. Second, why I started that newsletter, being a Latina in politics is hard. I feel like a lot of times I'm told, "Oh, you don't have enough experience."
Mm.
And it's like they're working with communities that look like me, but I don't have enough
Right.
experience.
Right.
So I just got tired of people telling me no. I was like, I'm not going to bring the chair to the table. I'm going to make my own table
I love that.
and start talking about taboo subjects that are important within our community and even in politics.
How does the P files intersect with politics for you?
For me, I feel like there's so many intersections.
Yeah.
But for me, being a career woman,
Hmm.
being Latina, that saying or like that stereotype of being like the spicy Latina
Mm.
or being too promiscuous.
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of times I had to take down a part of me when
Mhm.
working in these spaces. Like I couldn't really fully show up as myself. So like if I wanted to dress a certain way or like I wanted to do my makeup a certain way,
Right.
I feel like people weren't going to take me serious.
Mhm.
Um, so that's where that intersection comes from. And another one too also is, being a career woman and being a woman in politics, experiencing pleasure and being sexual is
Mhm.
not how can I say it?
It's not a priority. It's not.
It's not encouraged.
No. No.
Like
What do you mean? Pleasure for women, please.
exactly, exactly. So it's like there's a lot of things that we don't really talk about or like we can't dress like certain
Right.
types of ways and stuff.
Right.
So
Um, what within the P files are you like intersecting politics and sexuality?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am. So I talk to different women within the space. I talk to women in politics. I talk to women in sexual wellness, sex tech, and within those industries, I just try to highlight their stories and let other women, especially women of color, that I let them know like there's a possibility to have a career in this,
Mm,
and also, it's normal to talk about.
yeah, I think, and something I've said, I feel like quite a lot is how specifically in being Latina, we are sexualized by the
Mhm.
media every single day. But when we take ownership of that sexuality, now it's a problem. Now
Yeah,
it's a label. And so, why is it okay for society to sexualize us and our bodies and the exoticness of it all,
yeah.
right? But not if we own it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I was just having a conversation with one of my homegirls who's also a Latina, Puerto Rican. She works in government. And she was just telling me how sometimes, like, whenever she goes into interviews, she's like, oh my God, do I look too exotic? Like, I don't want to come off a certain way.
Yeah.
We have to think about how we're doing our hair, how we're
Yeah.
doing our makeup. What am I wearing? Like, what does this speak to the other person that's about to potentially give me a job
Right.
and it's in my career? Um, Another thing like I try to do within my newsletter is just to honestly say fuck it. Like if you want to be a model, if you want to go shake your ass in a music video, go do that. But
Right.
also you could be a career woman at the same time.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions of like you can't be sexy and smart. You
Mm,
can't be sexy and be a career woman.
right.
So
Like there's no way you can own your sexuality, own
mhm,
your pleasure, and still be a career woman.
exactly.
And I think we see that in a lot of spaces. I've dealt with it some here, but because we're in the romance space,
Mhm,
I think it's a little bit more forgiven than
yeah.
other spaces. But even within my own personal life, right? Like dealing with owning that sexuality, but like you can still be a businesswoman. You could
Mhm.
still own your own business. You could still run your shit. But I am also very much about my pleasure and sex and talking about it. And it doesn't seem like that matches well with society.
Yeah, exactly. And I recently read an article that it was about a woman. I believe she was running for office in New York, and the way that she was running for that the way that she was funding her campaign, she had OnlyFans. So she was funding her campaign through OnlyFans, and
I
like
fucking love that.
I know, right? And it's like if you have it, like
Do it.
exactly. But she got a lot of like hate for that, and I
Mm,
believe they I don't know if she still ran, but I believe, like, she just didn't get that much support, and a
Mm,
lot of people were like, "How are you gonna do that and run for office?"
right.
But it's like, you have men in office that are doing 10 times worse
Right.
stuff. I mean,
Right.
look at Trump, like,
Right.
he sexually assaulted people and
Right.
he still became president, so it's like,
What are we doing?
yeah,
And why is there
exactly.
a double standard?
Mhm.
And I think this goes back to when we talk about our Latinidad and um, the cultures that we grow up in, and how definitely our pleasure is not centered.
Mhm.
It's almost like you are just a vessel for pleasure,
Mhm.
right? The men's pleasure is centered, their masculinity is
Yeah.
centered, but not us and what's important for us. And I think a lot of us struggle with that, like how to have these conversations with now your parents, perhaps, right?
Mhm.
Because that's not something that you ever talked about. Like for me, my period when it came, it was just like, I think I went for like 3 days without telling my mom because I was like, I don't even
Yeah.
know how to have this conversation, you know?
Mhm.
And have you seen any, I guess, shift in that in now newer generations being more open to like breaking that taboo a little bit?
I do. I don't think I see it within first gens.
Mm,
For me personally, my parents don't even know that I talk about sex
mm.
online. And I don't want them to know because I already know that I'm going to get some
Right,
shit from them and
right,
I don't want to hear it.
right.
But for me, like, if God wants me to have children and I have a daughter, whatever, or even a son, I want to be able to have like that open conversation with them, something that I didn't have growing up. So,
Yeah, when I told my mom I was selling vibrators, I was so nervous to have that conversation. And
yeah.
even like when I was even in like my later 20s, like talking about like sex with my ex-husband,
Mhm.
like was not a thing that I did with my mom. And eventually when I came up with like the Steam box, which is our subscription box, we pair romance books and vibrators, um, I was like, I'm just gonna have to say it, especially because I knew I was gonna be all over social media. There's just like no way of hiding it. And at first it was like, what? And
Mhm.
then little by little, I think she has gotten more used to how out there I am, especially compared to like my brother and my sister.
Yeah.
Like I just went the other way with things. I'm very outspoken about things. I'm an open book. I just like say what's happening in my life.
Mhm.
Um, but that initial conversation of like sex toys, like till
Yeah.
this day, she's never used a toy.
Yeah.
And I remember one of her friends from Peru came to town and her friend asked me about him. And I was like, oh, I'll bring you some stuff. And my mom was like so taken aback that like her friend would want to try sex toys. And I'm like, mom, try them. Like
Yeah.
have
It's
fun. Like,
normal. Yeah, it's
right. Like
normal.
have a good time.
And it just goes back to like as the Latino as being Latina as being in the Latino culture, sex and pleasure are two completely different things. Sex is to have babies.
Mm,
And pleasure, only men can experience that, and that's how I see it.
yeah.
I feel like growing up, I didn't know I could experience pleasure on my own. I
Mm,
thought I needed a man to do that
right.
with, you know?
Right.
And I feel like a lot of times, if we would have that conversation about pleasure and using toys or whatever you're comfortable doing,
Right.
we could prevent a lot of STDs, STIs, pregnancies,
Yeah.
even at that. And also just giving ourselves to whoever, like men, women, whatever, just not having to deal with the emotional repercussions that come with sleeping with some
Right.
individuals that are not meant to have that
Right.
part of you.
Right. I joke about this a lot, but I'm like, if I would have known I could orgasm without a man, because first of all, it took years before a man
Yeah.
actually made me orgasm. I would probably have like half of my roster would be cleared out because it would have not been necessary.
Yeah.
But to that point, like if I would have learned about masturbation at a younger age and self pleasure and just like owning that in your body, like I feel like sure, orgasms are great, but if you think about it like a step further, it's like this whole like thing that your body is so magnificent in that sense that I feel like a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on. It's
Yeah.
just like again, orgasms pleasure, but like think about like your whole body experiencing
Mhm.
this and I feel like there's like a magic there that people are forgetting about. But yeah, like I think we could avoid a lot of things because we do think that men are the ones who are supposed to provide that pleasure and shit. I don't think I orgasmed with a man till I was like 22. So
Yeah.
like any time before that I was sexually active, like what was I really doing?
I didn't even know when I had an orgasm. I was like, "Oh, that's what that is." And it's like we don't even sometimes most of us don't even know what it means to even
Orgasm.
yeah, we don't know the proper definition. I didn't even know about that word honestly
Yeah.
until I got to my 20s.
Yeah, we put up like question boxes sometimes from the Steambox page, and we do kind of like confessions. And early on, I remember some people sharing like, I didn't even know like that I was having an orgasm, or like
Yeah.
when I was experiencing an orgasm, I was so scared because I didn't know what was happening to my body, and that makes me so sad that we've missed a such a key like communication between like mothers and daughters and just so on and so forth between family, and like bringing
Yeah.
that up and owning that.
Yeah. It's really sad and I feel like if we could just have those conversations and break those taboos and stigmas, like we could really build something better. But also it's generational,
Right.
you know? And how do you continue to break down those generational curses, you know?
Yeah, I agree. What is one way that you think people could start breaking some of that like taboo or even just like shame that we feel towards self-love, self-pleasure, sexuality?
That's a great question. For me, is it's about viewing self love and self experiencing pleasure on my own as self care
Mm,
and not labeling it as anything else. You know, I need pleasure. I need to have orgasms in order to show up 100% as myself. There's studies that even show if you have orgasms daily, it reduces stress.
yep.
So I think one of the biggest thing is starting to incorporate that into your self care routine and taking that time to really learn about your body and just know that I need, I want to do this. I need to do this in order to have a better sexual life and have a better life overall.
What is one way that you see shame still show up for you?
That's such a great question. I feel like every part of my life. No, I'm just kidding. Um, for me, the biggest one was having sex. Like sometimes I still feel shame of having sex. Like I shouldn't be doing this
Yeah.
because it's like it's the wrong thing to do.
Mm,
Um, so that's been a big hump for me to get over,
mhm.
especially growing. I mean, we're in Florida too, so it's like growing down south. It's like abstinence, and it's like, oh, if you have sex, you're a hoe.
Right.
Maybe I want to be a hoe.
Right.
So it's like,
And like that's okay.
yeah, exactly. Being a hoe, being a slut, like sluts vote, like
Right.
exactly.
Let's vote. I fucking love that. We do.
So yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is actually the act of having sex. And I've had conversation with other women of color
Mhm.
that feel the same way.
Yeah.
So
Um, I think for me it shows up after sex, like not during, but after it. There's this like kind of like dread
yeah.
that like sits in my bones for a little bit of
Yeah.
like, am
Yeah.
I okay? Like,
It's like I hear my mom's voice.
right? And I'm
Yeah.
like, am I good? Like why did I do that?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think shame shows up for me in a lot of ways. And I think even as people who are openly talking about sex and
Mhm.
orgasms, I feel like there's also something to acknowledge in that you battle taboo and you battle shame every day. It's not something that I think is removed completely at any point.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. And I hope one day I get there if it is. But I feel like with everything I say in this space, there's always a tad bit of like, remorse
Yeah.
almost like, should I have done that? Should I
Yeah.
have said that? Will I be welcomed less because I own my pleasure?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the biggest fear for me too is that I talk about sex so openly and I'm still in politics.
Mhm.
And I don't want people I mean, I don't give a fuck what people think of me, but also it's like my career.
Right,
And it's like I'm afraid of entering spaces. It's like, oh, she's too outspoken. Like
right,
we can't associate ourselves with her.
right.
So
And I think we also see this in the reading space a lot,
yeah.
in reading romance, and you kind of see the way like that shame shows up when people have conversations about romance. And I think your self-love, or your like embracing your sexuality journey, is something that is so beautiful and it's unique to each person. But you still see it show up in like when we have conversations about like, should there be cartoon
Yeah.
covers, or should it be like naked men on the cover, or like whatever. I feel like it shows up a lot in there. Is there anything that you say to yourself, or anything that you do to try to like work through that when it does show up?
I feel like my go-to is always like, "Fuck 'em. Fuck 'em." Like, this is my life.
Yeah.
This is my pleasure. Wait, can I cuss?
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah,
was like,
please.
"Can I cuss?" Um, I was like, yeah, like, honestly, like, fuck 'em. I feel like I allow myself to feel those feelings, and then I snap out of it. Um, so, I mean, it's every day is a new
Yeah.
thing, so,
And I think it's key, right, to
yeah,
acknowledge those feelings. Like,
yeah,
don't avoid them either, because I think you have to work through them.
mhm,
Um, and then like see what comes on the other side of that. Maybe
yeah,
it's something that's consistent, and then like maybe you can explore a little deeper on why that's showing up in that way. But um I mean, I feel like I literally go through like some kind of like season of this at any point in my life, because I'm always talking about some crazy shit.
yeah,
Um but I mean, at least that's kind of what I like try to tell myself,
yeah.
like fuck them and
Keep
fuck
your
it,
money
like
committed, like,
right.
if they're not paying for your rent, they're not paying
Right.
for nothing, like, who gives a fuck?
Yeah. Do you think that that affects dating at all?
So, I have a boyfriend,
Okay.
he loves the way that I am.
Okay.
Um, I have dated men in the past that were a little bit like,
Mm,
but I feel like dating in New York too, a lot of men over there are open.
yeah.
They're pretty open.
Yeah.
Um, they use like sex toys, and like different dating styles, you know.
Mhm.
But luckily with my boyfriend, he's like fully accepting of like who I am and he loves it.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I feel that now that I'm back in the dating scene, when tell people what I do, there's kind of like a touch and go there, where
yeah.
this will go one way or another because of what you will say about sex toys or pleasure. And so far, I feel like I've met a lot of duds on Hinge, but in the grand scheme of things, the people who I have had sexual relationships with, I feel like have been very accepting of
Yeah.
like sex toys, or trying something with a sex toy, where I feel like 10 years ago, there was like so much more like, you can't bring a sex toy into the
Yeah.
bedroom. Like, why do you need that? You have me. And it's like, baby, you can't even find my clit. Like,
I
I, so
screaming.
I like, yeah, I need it, but
Yeah.
I need it for both of us. Like,
Yeah.
I orgasm, you orgasm, we all orgasm,
It's
you
not,
know?
yeah, and it's not to take away from anything. It's just to add to the
Right.
experience.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of men don't understand that.
Yeah. And I think maybe it shows up as like, I think it was a guy who, it has to have been a man, who brought this up to me, but it was like, okay, how would you feel if it was the other way around, right? Like if your partner was the one who consistently needed to use a sex toy to orgasm, like you couldn't bring them that pleasure.
Mhm.
And I think when put in that perspective, I understood that point of view a little bit better.
Yeah.
Because before I was kind of like, I don't get what's the big deal. It's not you. Like the dick is good, but
Yeah.
like you just can't, everyone orgasms
Yeah,
differently. Like
exactly.
some people orgasm from penetration, some
Exactly.
never do, right? So like, help me out here, you know?
Let's
Um,
learn together.
right. But I think after that was put into perspective, I'm like, okay, so instead of me being just a complete asshole about it, like I just need to approach it with more caution or more care,
Yeah.
to really understand like why the sex toy, learn together, learn pleasure together, right? And not just like, I'm just like trying to compensate for something you lack, because that's not the case at all.
Yeah. I think for me in my relationship too, like I hope he doesn't get mad for me saying this, but like I had to introduce it slowly. Like
Yeah.
I asked him about it. I asked about like his comfort level,
Right.
and then I started like bringing out like the safer, like
Mhm.
beginner friendly toys.
Yeah.
And then when we got deeper in our relationship, we started whipping out like the big ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's all about introducing it slowly, and like there are going to be some people that are just not comfortable with
Right.
that. And maybe those are just not the people for you, you know.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
In the blog, is there anything you are currently working on as far as like the sexual space and politics?
What am I feel like my brain is
Yeah,
y'all,
you're
like,
like,
I work so much.
yeah,
I
you're
work
like, what's work?
yeah, I was like, I don't even know what's going on. I work 7 days a week with campaigns and trying to do my blog and politics.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I do wanna do, in-person events here in Miami,
Okay.
um, later, where I just, like, bring people together and we start having these
I
conversations.
love that.
But for right now, I'm just doing like the usual, like I talk about my experience. I just released June's first edition, where I talk about um, what happened to Congress, Dallas Representative Jasmine Crockett, another representative who was a Republican, and she was a white woman,
Mhm.
commented on her eyelashes, and I talk about how
Oh, I think I read something about
yeah,
that.
and
That she was like, your eyelashes
are too
are
big,
you
like,
can't
that's
read
why yeah,
correctly. It's fucking
exactly, and
idiot.
it's like, I was talking about
The
how
microaggressions are real.
yeah, and then it goes back to, like, as Black and brown women, like, we're not able to show up fully ourselves, and it's like, "Oh, if you care about your looks too much, like, you're not serious about anything." If you're into fashion and I
Mm,
talk about how AOC also talks about that. She talks about how if you're a woman in politics in Washington, DC, and you care about fashion and beauty, nobody's gonna take you
right.
serious. But it's like, why do I have to dress a certain type of way in order for
Why can't we be multifaceted? Why do we have to be
yeah.
just one single? Like, just because you can't have the ability to be multifaceted doesn't mean that I can't.
Yeah,
So,
and it goes back to our sexual experiences too, like those microaggressions, those not being blackballed from different spaces, that all impacts like our sexual experiences, our pleasure, and
mm,
how we show up in our sexual life.
yeah. What are you reading?
Right now, I'm reading that one. I'm reading The Art of Scandal.
Oh, wait,
Yes.
for you, that's perfect.
Really? Okay.
Because it's like there's kind of like a politics like
Okay.
subtrope
Yeah,
of
yeah,
like then like there it's an age gap and like the woman is older and obviously that's very taboo
yeah.
and I think she's like the wife of a politician, so like
Yeah.
how will that look?
Yes, so I'm reading that one right now. It's super good. Again, like I work a lot, so I'm trying to fit my reading time as much as I can.
Yeah.
But before that one, I was reading Take the Lead by Alexis Daria.
Okay.
So Alexis Daria is my favorite romance author just
I love
because
that.
one, she's Latina, two, she was the first romance author that I got into.
Okay.
I just started reading romance last year.
Okay.
My first book was You Had Me at Hola.
Okay.
And I loved it because she writes characters that are Latinas, super successful, and embrace their sexuality and their pleasure.
Right.
And they're like, they're
Right.
just,
They can be
yeah,
successful, they can embrace their pleasure, and they can have a family. Like they could have it all.
exactly.
They can have whatever they
Exactly.
want. There's no limits. Right.
Exactly. And that's the biggest things like with my newsletter, like I want women to feel like that. Like, it's okay to be sexual and have a career and do whatever you want. Like you
Right.
just don't have to stay in one lane.
Yeah.
So yeah, Alexis Daria is my favorite. I'm gonna look around after
Yeah.
this too and buy some.
I
So
feel like if you like Alexis, Adriana Herrera is
okay.
also going to be very much up your alley. Same thing. And I think, again, I think we can talk about representation in media.
Mhm.
And obviously, in this, we're talking about books, but how important it is for us to see ourselves
Yeah.
in that light. Especially, I think our Latin experiences are often focused on like immigration or immigration stories, our coming of age stories, but they're not enough focused on our happiness or our pleasure. And I think when you're reading from other Latin authors who are writing that you can fall in love and you can be successful in your
Yeah,
career
exactly.
and you can get bent over after work, like,
Exactly.
or sometimes during work,
Even before, yeah.
before, after, during, like, we can do it all.
Yeah,
Like, I
exactly.
think brings such a like great light to like who we are and who we can be and that we don't need to be boxed in.
Yeah. And it breaks that stigma too of like, shit, if you want to do BDSM, but you also want to, I don't know, be in IT, whatever you want to
Right.
do, you can do all of that.
Right. Like you could be an IT girly at during the day and a BDSM girly at
Exactly. You
night.
could be a PhD girly and be a dom.
And I fucking love it. Someone needs to write that book. Like
I'm on it
right now.
I'm on it.
Oh
No,
my
I'm just
God.
kidding.
Are there any other, or I guess maybe the better question is, how do you think starting to read romance has maybe shifted your mind about like different things in the like pleasure and romance realm, if at all?
Yeah, I before I started reading pleasure, I had a sense of what romance novels were, especially like growing up. I would go to Sam's and I would go to the book
Mhm.
section, and I would see like what was that one model's name? Fabio.
Fabio.
He was on all the romance novels. I was like,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm supposed to be reading this. So I kind of had an idea, but actually reading it, I'm just like, wow, like this is amazing. And it's like it's characters with that are black and brown women, black and brown men. And again, like you said, we don't see ourselves being portrayed in that sense.
Mhm.
And even culturally, like we don't talk about this. Um, so it's just giving me a whole new light where for me, it becomes more and more okay to talk about.
Mm.
Because I think the biggest thing too, you know how you were saying like you sell vibrators, you talk about that all the time. My biggest fear is starting this newsletter, and because I'm the same way, I'm always talking about sex, I'm always talking about vibrators. I don't want to be viewed as the horny girl. Like
Mm.
that's the horny girl. She's
Um,
always talking about sex
I'm
and stuff like
convinced
that. But it's like, who
someone
gives
thinks I
a
am
fuck?
the horny girl,
Yeah,
especially if you look at my threads lately.
I'm.
But it's fine.
Yeah,
It's fine. And I think I definitely seen a shift in a little bit in society in what romance has done for people, where
mhm,
even I think 3 4 years ago when creators or bloggers were talking about romance books, I don't think it was with this much openness,
yeah,
where I feel like year by year, book by book, shame is being removed brick by brick. I think sometimes people don't have enough grace for people in that, depending on how you grew up, depending if the church is involved,
mhm,
depending on your culture and how your family upbringing was, that wall is even higher than
yeah,
others. And you have to combat a lot of that shame internally. And
mhm,
it's a lot of self work. And I don't think people have enough grace sometimes for people who are still
yeah,
in that journey. I always tell people embracing your sexuality doesn't have to look how it looks for me.
exactly,
It can look however it looks like for you, as long as you're happy, safe, and you are removing shame from what you're experiencing.
exactly.
There's not like one fits all in this.
Yeah, and with romance novels too, again, like there's things that I read, I'm like, let me jot that down and try that later or something like that. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. It gives us more of a broad view, and I feel like it's just the start of the conversation that
Right,
needs to happen.
right. How do you think we, within our own communities, our own group of friends or circles, how can we move the conversation forward?
Being supportive of one another. Right when you asked that, I thought about this one moment. I was living in New York City. I went to a sex toy store, and I believe it was Brooklyn, and there's 3 women in there. I believe they were Latinas,
Mhm.
and one of the girls was trying to look for her new like, her first vibrator,
Mhm.
and her friends were just like, "Just get whatever, like, it's all the same." They weren't really supportive,
Mm.
and I remember stepping in and like, "Girl, get that one." Like, that
Yeah,
was my first one, like,
yeah,
"You're gonna love it."
yeah.
And just to see her face, like, glow up and like, "Okay, like, I trust you, like,
Right.
if you say this is good, I'm gonna do it." So I think just having, like, that supportive environment and just not being afraid to say what's on your mind and not judge one another's for their experiences.
Yeah. And I think that that's key, right? We use this term in the romance world a lot. Don't yak on somebody's yum.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes it's hard again,
Yeah,
right? Like we all have our biases. We all have like our conceptions of what is good, what is bad, what's pleasurable, what's not. But I think, especially within in general, this is how you should carry yourself. But I think, especially with like the people who are
mhm,
opening themselves to you, remembering that like just because something's for somebody doesn't mean that it's for you or not for you, but like be open in that.
yeah, exactly, and it's also not just about pleasure, but also when it comes to our health. There's a lot of taboos and stigmas around sexual health, like STDs, STIs, like herpes,
Mhm.
um, chlamydia, gonorrhea. So if like someone approaches you like, oh my God, I think I have this, like,
Mhm.
let's not call them dirty. Let's not call
Right.
them, oh, other names,
Right.
that are not, that are harmful to our mental health, and also respects one another. I feel like there's a lot of that stigma within our society too.
Mhm.
Somebody gets a STD, STI, like, oh, they're dirty. And it's like, that's not even what is even clean.
Right. Right.
So,
Like it can happen to anybody
exactly.
any day. Um yeah, and I think with that, I would love to see some of that more in romance books.
Mhm.
I think I haven't seen like too much conversation about STDs or STIs or um plan B or
That's
anything like
true.
that in
Yeah.
books. And I understand, right? Like when you're writing, period, a lot of the time you're writing to escape, kind of like, so why add on like
Hmm.
another thing that we all are already worrying about? So I
Yeah.
hear that. But I think, I guess, in if you're looking at it from a like progressing your like sexual journey, it would be so nice to, yeah, like read about your
Yeah.
protagonist going to Planned Parenthood to get STI checked because like shit's not good right now,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. I feel like too, a lot of times, especially during college, there was moments that I experienced stuff and I was like, oh my God, I'm the only one experiencing this. But if I was able to read something, it's like, oh, this is
Yes.
normal.
Yes.
Like, it's okay to
Yeah.
be going through this. I mean, it's
Right.
not okay, but it's okay that I'm
Right.
feeling what I'm feeling and I'm
Right.
not alone.
Right. And I think that that applies to anything. And I think it's why I'm so open with like my experiences in
Yeah.
life. Um, because, and you know, I've had some men I feel tell me like, why are you so out there?
Mhm.
If I'm out there, then I'm not for you because I'm not
Yeah.
going to change that. And I think that it's taken me a long time to like come back into my voice and trust myself again. But for the amount of people who say that, there's like a much greater amount who are feel seen because you are sharing that story, because it's also happened to them,
Mhm.
and they didn't know how to navigate it, or it does happen to them and they're like, shit, remember that time you shared XYZ.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the beauty of that world.
Mhm.
But in that kind of what we talked about earlier is figuring out also how to balance it within yourself, because there's also things that are going to come up for you.
Yeah, and again, they're gonna get triggered.
Yeah.
You're gonna feel like, okay, I already healed from this, and then somebody brings it up, and you're like, oh shit, why am I feeling like this? So it's a never. I always see healing as a never-ending journey.
Yep.
It's not.
Ongoing.
Yeah.
Ongoing.
Yeah.
What is your favorite way to embrace your sexuality?
So many ways. For me, it's about. I don't like scheduling, but it's taking the time to experience pleasure on my own,
Mm,
because I never knew I could do that.
right.
And that has allowed me to learn so much about myself, so much about my sexuality and what pleasure looks like and feels like for me, and being able to communicate that to my partner as well.
Mm. What is your favorite vibrator right now?
Oh my God, I don't even know the name of it. I recently tried the Ava vibrator,
Okay.
but it's too big. Like, I just didn't like it.
Okay.
I don't like,
They have
but
different kinds too.
yeah, I don't like the ones that look like what's it called? Massage guns? I
Okay.
don't really
Like
like those.
wands,
Yeah,
kind of.
I don't
Okay.
really like those.
Okay.
But I found one, it's purple. I don't know the name, but I found it on Amazon.
Okay.
It looks like a little, like a fairy wand,
Okay.
and it has like a little ball at the very tip. The ball is super
I
tiny.
know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and
Is it long or is it short?
yeah,
Okay.
it's long.
Hmm.
It's like it's thick and then it goes into like a very thin wand,
Yeah.
and like you could change out like the little ball. Yeah,
Oh,
it's my favorite. I told my homegirl about it. She was like, "Girl, thank you." I was like, I
nice.
know." I was like, "It's really yeah."
Nice. I feel like I've seen some like that from Satisfyer, that are supposed to be more of like a G spot, like
Mhm.
massager type thing, but you can't change out the circles. So I'll
Mhm.
have to look into that. There's another vibe from I think it's Love Not War. What I love about their products is that the battery always remains the same, so it's this like rechargeable thing,
Okay.
but you change out the tops.
Oh,
So
that's
they
nice.
each top does something different,
Mhm.
and I absolutely love that.
I need to try that.
Yeah. What is something that you have read or are reading in the sexual realm space that you think everyone should read?
That's a great question. Right now, I've been doing research for my newsletter,
Mhm.
and something I'm reading more and more about is PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. Basically, it's when some individuals who menstruate,
Mhm.
they may experience severe anxiety and depression weeks before their period starts, and it could also lead to suicidal thoughts.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm reading about that. I feel like a lot of um people need to read about that more because I just learned about that on TikTok a couple years, or not a couple years ago, a couple weeks ago. Because for me, I noticed that a couple days, a couple weeks before my period, I get extremely like
Yeah.
depressed.
Yeah.
And it's not normal depressed. Like,
Right.
yeah, it's like, it's really bad.
Yeah.
I was like, this has to be like, something's wrong with me.
Mm.
And that popped up into my feed. And I feel like I'm going, like, the symptoms are like aligning. So I feel like a lot of people need to read more about that.
I think something I want to learn more about is like the different things that your body goes through throughout like
Mhm.
the term of your cycle and like the different levels of whatever. I
Yes.
feel like I feel like we in general don't know enough about like our bodies in terms of our period and like what happens to it because
Yeah.
no one teaches that.
Yeah, nobody. And it's like I remember being in school, the PE teacher just put a video and didn't say anything. Just let us watch that.
Right.
And that's it. But again, like period health, menstrual health, that goes into our pleasure too, that affects our sexual life.
Yeah.
And I feel like more and more men also need to learn about that.
I agree.
So
where can people find you?
people can find me outside. No, I'm just kidding.
Same.
People can find me at my personal Instagram is at Love Me Lorena.
Okay.
And then
I love that.
thank you. I created it, I think, when I was in high school. I don't even know what I was doing. Being bad at shit. No, I'm just kidding. Um, where else?
About P files. Where can they find
Yes,
P
the P
files?
files. The Instagram for that is at the P files newsletter. And then I have my own TikTok. I just integrated my TikTok and my newsletter together because I'm not about to do a whole nother
Yeah,
TikTok.
I hear you.
I believe that's Lorena _ the P files.
Okay.
So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Lorena. So if you had to fuck, marry, kill, which one would you fuck? Which one would you marry? And which one would you kill?
Fuck enemies to lovers.
Great choice.
Kill single dad. I'm sorry. I'm nobody's stepmom. I'm sorry. No, that's so bad. But no,
Who are you going to marry?
I would marry friends to lovers.
Okay. Solid.
Yeah.
Solid choices.
Yeah, exactly. So, I was so quick with the stepdad one. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, a single dad, I'm not big on. That's a lie. In books, I am very big on single dads, which I think have opened my mind up to like, you have a kid, like
maybe I need to read more, but
yeah,
been there, done that, never going back. So
okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You can follow us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Romance Unleashed Pod, and see you next time. Bye.